really? Can our hearts and desires and our wants, can they really be shaped? I mean, advertisers know this and spend like $1 million gazillion every year, right? An obscene amount of money every year to shape our hearts and our desires and our wants. Does that really work? Could we do something to shape our own hearts and desires? I don't know if you've ever thought about that. Can you shape what you want? Can you guide your heart? We're at the first Sunday of Lent, 40-day season, a journey where we follow Jesus to Jerusalem and the cross and ultimately to Easter. And this year, our goal together is to change our wants and desires and our hearts. We want to be changed by love. We want to be changed into people who love more. And our key passage for this is going to be 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It's Paul's famous love chapter, and we're going to focus on verses 4 through 7. Let me read these verses to you this is the New Living Translation. Paul writes, "Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance." Now, as I read this description of love, I have two thoughts that immediately just jump into my mind. And the first one is this: I can be loving. I know how to be kind and patient. I don't rejoice when I see injustice. I don't demand my own way. At least not all the time, right? And that's the second thought. I can't be loving for very long. I know how to do it, but I can't do it for very long. I may not be jealous all the time, but when I hear about a friend who's getting ready for an exotic vacation, or when I have a colleague who's been invited to be on an important committee, I feel jealous. No, really, I do. I feel jealous. I can be kind when I have the time. But if you start filling up my schedule, my kindness shrinks to mere politeness. And sometimes not even that polite. My love does give up without much of a fight. It loses hope so quickly sometimes that it's embarrassing. I know what it feels like to love, but I also know that I'm not very good at it. And the people who know me best, the people who have seen behind the pastor, hat I wear, they're the people who see this most often and most starkly. Get very close to me. And eventually, I'm going to say eventually. What I mean is before too long, right? Eventually, you'll see a side of me that isn't very loving, isn't willing to sacrifice, isn't willing to take risks. I'm guessing I'm not alone here in this. I want to love more. I'm not just saying that because I'm up here. I really do. I want to love more. And I'm convinced that if I could love more, it would make the biggest impact on my life and my family and our church and our community. I mean, think about this for a moment. I could make twice as much as I do now. I could give the best advice. I could be Dr. Phil to my kids, right? I could do all sorts of projects around the house so that my honey-do list is 0. But put all of those together, and it wouldn't change my family as much as simply loving them more. Stop and think about that. I could make twice as much as I do now, and my family wouldn't be better than if I simply loved them more. Now, they might protest about that. I don't know. My kids are real kids, you know. I could double the hours I work here at church. I could do an in-depth study of leadership, bring in consultants and experts, and yet it wouldn't have near the impact on us as simply loving more. Crazy, isn't it? But it's exactly what Paul says in the first verses of 1 Corinthians 13. He writes this: if I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but didn't love others, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, if I had such faith that I could move mountains, but didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. Our focus this Lent is going to be on love. And more than just knowing more about love, more than studying love, we are honestly going to try to grow in love. My desire for you, our goal as a community, is to grow in love over the next 40 days or so. We want to change our hearts and the way we interact with each other over this season of Lent. And I got to assure you, first off, that this is not a self-help or a self-improvement project. Because if it is, we're doomed. Self-improvement is great. I love reading about self-improvement. I love reading. Did you catch that? I love reading about self-improvement. And it's great if you need to be more efficient with your time, or you want to get out of debt, or you want to start a new hobby. But when it comes to changing who we are inside, when it comes to making new people out of us, we need a whole lot more than self-help. We need a lot more than whatever we can do to improve ourselves. We just don't have the power to change us from the inside out. Only God has this power. And God does have this power. And we'll be relying this season on God to produce the fruit of love in us. Did you hear that? We are not going to be doing it ourselves. We are going to be relying on God to produce the fruit in us. We'll look to the Father's goodness and grace. We'll follow Jesus' teachings and his example. We'll learn to rely on the Holy Spirit, hopefully daily, maybe even hourly, for his guidance and strength. But just because this is not our project and this is not self-help doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can't, doesn't mean that we can't do anything. We can put ourselves in the right place for God to do God's work. We can create space for God to do God's work. We may not be able to change ourselves, but we can surrender and show ourselves ready for God to make the change inside of us. We're going to need to do some things together. I've got a list. 4 things. We need focus. The one thing we need, the first thing we need is focus. Because without a shared focus, we'll find ourselves distracted, right? Pulled in a dozen different directions. You'll hear about 3 new diets and 4 ways to save time and ways to save money this week. And if we don't have a focus of growing love, we're going to be chasing our tails. So as a church, we're going to focus all our efforts. You might get sick of it by day 36, but we're going to focus everything we have, all of what we do, on love. Learning and growing in love. The second thing we're going to do is reflect. Spend some time in reflection. One of the most difficult parts of growing is taking that hard look in the mirror when you have to be honest with yourself about where you're at. For Weight Watchers, it's taking that first step onto the scale and seeing the number and realizing that it's not a lie, that you really are there, and knowing that you have to change. It's easy to float through life without doing this and think we're pretty good compared to others, but when we look into the mirror and see just how far short of loving we fall, it's a sobering reality. But I don't say it to make us feel bad. The purpose of reflection, of seeing who we are for who we really are, is not so that we'll beat up on ourselves. That's not the purpose. The reality is when we finally look into the mirror and we reflect on who we really are, we're in the best place at that point to be ready for God to help us. You realize that if nothing's wrong with you, then you don't need grace. If you never do anything wrong, then you don't need forgiveness. And so reflection is that tool that God has given us to look at who we are and say, God, I need you. Every hour, I need you. The third thing we'll be invited to do is to engage into some practices. In case you don't know, love is a noun and also a verb. And you won't know love as a noun unless you practice love as a verb. And so we're going to practice some things together. And some of them will be related directly with love, and some of them won't be, and that's okay. We're going to do some practices. Think of them as spiritual workouts. Reflection itself is a spiritual workout that we do. It's not always easy. It's not always fun, but it does good work in us. So is Bible reading. And each week we'll invite you to read some verses from the Bible. One week we'll practice rest. Doesn't that sound funny? We're going to practice resting. We're really active in resting. And there'll be other practices for us. Each week we'll have a practice for you to try. That's 3. Number 4. So we've got focus, reflection, practice, and partners. We're going to encourage you to partner up. We're going to be taking this journey together. Every Sunday we'll be focused on it. At our small groups we'll be focused on it. We'll be sending you emails to help you focus on it. But even more than just our community doing this, if you partner up with someone, a friend, a spouse, you will find that you are much more ready for God to do work in you. Taking a journey with a friend is always better than going alone. Having the support and challenge of a friend is almost always makes a project better. You encourage one another. You challenge one another. You pray for one another. And so we're inviting you. Who might you ask to join you on this journey? Who will share your successes and struggles? And this morning we're going to get started. We're going to get started here at the communion table. And after you come forward to receive communion, we're going to invite you to pick up either a washer here or a bracelet. the washers on the bracelet and the washers in the little cup there all have the word love stamped on them. There's nothing sacred about this little washer, right? Paul was wondering, had we blessed it or anything like that? No. What it is a simple reminder. Now listen, it's a simple reminder that becomes sacred as you let God do the work in you. And so, if you're not a bracelet type of person, you could put this on your keys, or you could just take a washer and keep it with you. But our invitation is for you to keep this washer with you all the time. Make it a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute reminder that our focus is on love. The love God pours into us and the love that we want to share with others. After you grab that, pick up one of these cards. It's got the way of love, and it's got our passage from 1 Corinthians 13 in it. If you picked one up at Ash Wednesday, it's the same card. You don't need to grab one. Otherwise, grab one, and on the back, there's the first week's worth of reflection questions that you'll be able to ask yourself. Okay? Now, let me just say, I've listed 4 things. I've given you a lot of things to think about and to do and to feel challenged by. But I want you to know that most of all, what this is an invitation. If you're not ready to do this, then by all means, don't do it. You might pray that you want to do it. That might not be a bad thing. If this feels overwhelming to you, start where you can. Start with what you're a little uncomfortable with, right? Because if you're comfortable with something, you're not going to grow. But if you step a little bit over into discomfort, we would just invite you to do that. We're going to send you an email. In fact, we've already sent you an email. I believe it is on Tuesday or Wednesday last week. If you did not receive the Way of Love email, you need to talk to me afterwards so I can get you on our email list, because I blasted it out to the whole Bethany membership list I have. Okay? But again, we're starting this journey here because the first thing we are going to be honest about is the fact that we desire more. Or we want to desire more. We want to want more of Jesus. And it's at this table that we find that when we bring our emptiness and our hunger and our weakness to him, he fills us with himself. Isn't that miraculous? We come with nothing. He gives us everything and makes us into people that we are not.